The cake had 5 tiers. I remember that because I counted them while my mother pulled me into the hallway and told me to take off my badge. "Just for tonight," she said. Her voice was low, careful, the way she used to talk to me when I was 7 and had done something wrong at church. "Just while we're at the reception. You can put it back on after." I looked down at it. Gold shield, dark blue enamel, the word detective printed in clean letters above my badge number. I had earned it 14 months ago, the same week my brother got engaged. "Mom," I said, "it's part of my dress uniform. I know what it is." She smoothed the front of her blouse. "I just don't want it to be a whole thing." I didn't say anything. She glanced back toward the ballroom, where the string quartet was playing something from the Vitamin String Quartet playlist my sister-in-law had picked. 460 people in formal wear, candlelight on every table, centerpieces that had cost more than my first car. My brother's wedding. "Your father agrees with me," she added. I put the badge back in my clutch and walked back inside. That was the first time I left it off. It wouldn't be the last decision I made that night that I'd have to live with. I should tell you something about my brother first, because none of this makes sense without understanding who he is to our family. His name is Colton. He's 3 years older than me, and from the time he was about 12 years old, our parents treated his life like a project they were personally invested in. Not in a cruel way. Not even consciously, I don't think. It was just that Colton was the kind of person things came easily for. He was charming and tall and got decent grades without trying very hard, and he had this laugh that made people feel included. Teachers liked him. Coaches kept him on rosters even when he probably shouldn't have made cuts. He walked into rooms, and rooms rearranged themselves around him. I was the other one. I don't say that bitterly. I figured out who I was early enough that it didn't break me. I was quiet. I was precise. I liked order and patterns and the feeling of knowing where everything was. I read case files for fun in high school. I took a criminal justice course at the community college the summer before my junior year and came home every Tuesday evening feeling more like myself than I did anywhere else. My father ran a landscaping company. My mother taught piano out of our living room 3 afternoons a week. Neither of them had ever known anyone in law enforcement, and when I told them at 18 that I wanted to go into it, my mother nodded the way she nodded at things she didn't fully understand, and my father said, "That's a rough career, sweetheart." "You sure?" I was sure. I went through the academy at 22, made patrol officer at 23. Passed my detective's exam on the first attempt and got promoted to the Crimes Against Persons unit at 28. The promotion was quiet, internal, no ceremony. My supervisor called me into his office, slid the new badge across the desk, shook my hand. I drove home alone and sat in my parking lot for 10 minutes just holding it. I called my mom. She said, "That's wonderful, honey." "Oh, did I tell you Colton's girlfriend might be getting a promotion too?" "At the marketing firm?" I said I hadn't heard that. I congratulated Colton's girlfriend when I saw her next. She was perfectly nice. She had been perfectly nice the whole 3 years my brother had been dating her, and I had never had a single problem with her until the week before the wedding, when she called my mother and said she was worried the badge and the dress uniform would make the photos look uneven. Uneven. That was the word. I only know because my mother told me, in that same careful, low voice, 3 days before I was supposed to fly to Phoenix for the rehearsal dinner. "She's not trying to be difficult," my mom said over the phone. "She just has a very specific vision for the photos, and she's worried that my job will make the pictures look uneven." She didn't mean it that way. How did she mean it? A pause. "She just thinks maybe the formal look might feel a little out of place against the other bridesmaids." I wasn't a bridesmaid. I was the sister of the groom, attending as a guest. But I had worn my dress uniform to 2 other family events, my cousin's commissioning ceremony and my grandfather's funeral, and I suppose the precedent had worried her. I told my mother I would think about it. Then I hung up and sat with it for 3 days, the way I sit with everything that bothers me when I'm trying to figure out if I'm being unreasonable or if the thing actually is unreasonable. I decided to fly to Phoenix and figure it out in person. The rehearsal dinner was at a steakhouse in Scottsdale that had a private room in the back and a prix-fixe menu that started at $90 a person. My brother paid for it. He had done well for himself in commercial real estate, and he spent money the way people do when they've been waiting a long time to prove they could. The tables had little name cards in silver holders. There were toasts. My father teared up. I sat between my aunt and a college friend of my brother's whose name I immediately forgot, and I watched my brother laugh at the far end of the table, easy and bright, and I thought, I'm glad you have this. I genuinely am. I just wish it didn't cost me something every single time. After dinner in the parking lot, my sister-in-law found me by my rental car. She was holding her clutch in both hands, and she looked like she'd been working herself up to the conversation. I just want to say, I hope you know I have so much respect for what you do, she said. Thank you, I said. It's just the photos, honestly. My photographer has a whole plan, and she said anything asymmetrical in the formal group shots is going to be really hard to. I understand, I said. And I did understand. I understood exactly what was happening. She touched my arm. You're the best. I smiled the smile I use when I'm interviewing someone who isn't being fully honest with me. That night in my hotel room, I called my best friend, who I've known since the academy, and who has approximately zero patience for anything she considers unnecessary suffering. Wear the uniform, she said immediately. My mom asked me not to. Your mom can ask. You don't have to agree. It's my brother's wedding. He didn't ask you, his wife did. Difference. I thought about that. If you don't wear it, she said, you're going to spend the rest of your life knowing you took it off because someone's photographer had a vision. Is that who you want to be? I slept on it. I woke up at 5:30 the way I always do, ran 3 miles around the resort loop, came back, showered and sat on the edge of the bed in my towel for a long time. Then I put on my dress uniform. The venue was a restored historic building downtown, the kind of place with exposed brick and arched windows and the slight smell of old wood that costs extra. I arrived exactly on time, which is something my sister-in-law had specifically requested. Please don't be early, the setup photos are very important. I was not early. I walked in at the exact minute the doors opened for guests. The foyer was already filling up. The foyer before anyone saw me. The low murmur of 400 people, finding their seats, heels on stone floor, someone's child being shushed near the coat check. Then a woman near the door looked up, saw me, and stopped moving. I kept walking. There's something about the dress uniform. It's not designed for attention, it's designed for formality, for precision, for respect. But when you're not expecting to see it, it does something to a room. The dark navy, the gold insignia, the badge that catches light at a specific angle. People respond to it the way they respond to anything that reminds them of something larger than the moment they're standing in. I found my seat. 4th row, right side, which was where the card said Katelyn, and which was, I noticed, not near any immediate family. I sat down. The woman in the row ahead of me turned around. She was in her 60s, silver hair, pearl earrings. She looked at me for a moment. Detective, she said quietly. Yes, ma'am. She nodded once slowly, like she was processing something. Then she turned back around. I didn't see my mother until right before the processional. She came down the side aisle, spotted me from 15 feet away, and her face did something complicated. Not angry exactly. More like someone who had been hoping a problem had solved itself and now had to accept that it hadn't. She sat 3 rows up. She didn't come to speak to me. The ceremony was beautiful. I'll say that honestly. My brother cried when he saw his wife come through the doors, which I did not expect from him, and watching him cry made me cry a little too, quietly, the way I do things. The vows were specific and personal, and you could tell they had actually written them themselves. There was a moment near the end where the officiant said something about the people who had shaped who they were, and my brother looked out at the crowd, and his eyes found mine for 1 second, and I don't know what was in that look. I still don't. The reception was across the courtyard in a glass-walled room that opened onto a garden. Cocktail hour first, then dinner. I stood near the edge of the garden with a glass of sparkling water and talked to my aunt, who was the only person in my immediate family who had ever asked me a follow-up question about my work. You look wonderful, she said. She meant the uniform. Your grandfather would have loved this. He had been a Korean War veteran. He died 6 years ago, and I thought about him every time I wore it. I know, I said. We stood there for a moment in the evening air. Then I heard something change in the room behind us. It wasn't loud. It was actually the opposite of loud. It was a pocket of quiet that spread outward from somewhere near the entrance, the way silence does when something unexpected happens. The string quartet had just shifted from Pachelbel to something else, and then they stopped mid-phrase. I turned. At the entrance to the reception room, a group of guests had gathered, and in the center of it stood a man in his 70s in a dark suit, and beside him, another man, and both of them were looking at me across the room with an expression I recognized. Veterans recognize each other. It's not mystical, it's just that there are certain things you look for and certain things that look back. The man in the dark suit began to walk toward me. By the time he was halfway across the room, 2 other men had stood from their 7. By the time he told me later, it was Gerald. No, wait. I want to tell this right. His name was Walt. Walter Sims III, he said with a small, dry smile. Korea, he said, and then he paused and said, my father was Korea, I was Vietnam, and my son was Fallujah. He put out his hand. I saw the badge, he said. Detective? Homicide, I said. 10 years on the force, he nodded. He had the kind of face that had seen a lot of things and kept most of them. My granddaughter was going to be a cop, he said. Changed her mind junior year, went into nursing instead. Nothing wrong with nursing, I said. No, he said, nothing at all. He paused. But I'm glad there are still people who do what you do. I didn't know what to say to that. I thanked him. He shook my hand again and turned to go back to his table, and as he did, he stopped at one table, then another, and I watched him say something quietly to each person he stopped at, and one by one those people turned to look at me. By the time my brother and his wife made their entrance into the reception room, 11 men and 1 woman, all of them, with the quiet uprightness of people who had served, were standing near the edges of the room. And when the DJ cut the music for the entrance announcement and everyone's attention snapped to the doors, the 12 of them stayed standing, just standing, hands at their sides or folded in front of them. Still, I don't know if my brother noticed at first. He was smiling, that bright smile, walking in with his wife, and the room was applauding. But then something made him pause, and he followed the line of standing figures around the room, and then his eyes came to me. His smile changed, not less happy, different. Dinner was set courses, and I was seated at a table with my aunt and 3 couples I didn't know, which suited me fine. The man to my left introduced himself as a retired paramedic from Tucson, and we talked for 20 minutes about the intersection of emergency response and criminal investigation in a way that I found genuinely interesting and that my sister-in-law, I think, had not anticipated when she did the seating chart. My mother came to my table between the salad course and the entree. She sat in the empty chair next to me that had been left vacant. Someone's sick child had kept a couple home, and she put her hand on top of mine on the table. I owe you an apology, she said. I looked at her. Not just for tonight. She was staring at the centerpiece. For a long time, I think. I didn't feel the silence. That's a skill they teach you in interrogation, and it turns out it works everywhere else too. When you were 12, she said, you came home from school and you told us you wanted to be a detective. And your father said, that's a rough career, are you sure? And I said, there are so many other options. She paused, and you looked at us and you didn't say anything. You just went to your room. And I told myself I was being practical. You were, I said. I was being afraid, she said. There's a difference. I looked at my hands. I didn't know how to be afraid for you and still encourage you at the same time, she said. So I just kept choosing one of those things, the wrong one. Across the room, the DJ was setting up for the first dance. My brother was leaning down to say something to his wife, and she was laughing at whatever it was. He didn't ask me to take off the badge, I said. Not accusatory, just noting. My mother nodded slowly. No, she said. He didn't. After dinner, my brother found me near the bar. He had loosened his tie and his face was flushed from dancing, and he looked genuinely like the happiest version of himself I had ever seen. Hey, he said. Hey, he stood next to me, both of us looking out at the dance floor. I heard what happened, he said, with the veterans. I didn't plan it. I know. He picked up his drink, set it back down. For the record, I never asked her to say anything to you about the uniform. I know, I said. I should have said something sooner. When she mentioned it to Mom, I should have said something. I turned to look at him. He was looking at the dance floor, jaw tight. We didn't have a lot of conversations growing up where I defended you, he said. I noticed that about us, recently. I've been thinking about it a lot, actually. He finally turned and looked at me. I'm sorry for that. My brother is not only a person who apologizes, not because he's cruel, just because things have mostly gone right for him and so the occasions have been rare. I knew what it cost him to say it. Okay, I said. He laughed a little. Okay. That's all I get? You'll get more when I've processed it. He nodded. He knew me well enough to know that was true. She's going to apologize too, he said. Not tonight, she's in the middle of something with the photographer. But she will. I'm going to make sure. I believed him, not blindly, but I believed him. He put his arm around my shoulders, briefly the way he used to do when we were kids and one of us had gotten hurt. Then he went back to his wife and the photographer and the rest of his wedding night. At 10:30, I stepped outside to the garden for some air. The evening had cooled into something comfortable, low 60s, clear sky. I leaned on the stone railing and let myself breathe for a few minutes. Walt found me out there. He came through the side door with a jacket over his arm and stood beside me at the railing, looking out at the same dark garden. Good night, he said. Very good, I said. We were quiet for a moment. My father, he said eventually, came back from Korea and went straight back to work at his brother's hardware store. Didn't talk about it, didn't wear anything that identified him, just put it away and moved forward. He paused. I used to wonder if that was strength or something else. What do you think now? I asked. I think it was survival, he said. And I think survival and hiding look similar from the outside, but they feel different from the inside. I wasn't hiding tonight, I said. No, he said, you weren't. He pushed off the railing and put his jacket back on. Thank you for your service, he said, quietly, without performance. Thank you for yours, I said. He went back inside. I stayed out there for another few minutes, looking at the dark garden, at the lights, strung up in the trees, at the way the evening looked when everything was finally still. I had spent 10 years walking into rooms and reading them, figuring out what was actually happening underneath what everyone was performing. It was a skill that felt like a burden most of the time, the way any accurate instrument does when it keeps showing you things you'd rather not see. But tonight it had shown me something true. My mother at my table, choosing honesty over comfort. My brother in his wedding suit, accounting for a debt he'd let accumulate for years. 12 strangers who stood not because anyone asked them to, but because they knew what it meant to carry a thing that deserved to be carried in the open. Service is not something you put away to make the photos look even. It is not something you leave in the hotel rooms so no one feels awkward. It lives in how you walk into a room and what you refuse to apologize for when you get there. I went back inside. My sister-in-law was at the center of the dance floor, laughing at something, light catching her dress. She looked happy. I hoped she was. I hoped she would stay that way. She caught my eye across the room, and the look that moved between us was a real one, not the smile she had given me in the parking lot, not the touch on the arm, but something less practiced, something that understood we had moved past the version of ourselves that had that conversation. I raised my glass slightly. She nodded. That was enough. For now, it was enough. I found my aunt and we danced to the last 3 songs together, badly, the way people do when they don't care, and that's exactly the point. And when the lights came up and the DJ thanked everyone, and the night started breaking apart into goodbyes and car keys and hugs held a beat too long, I walked out through the main doors into the cool Phoenix night with my badge still exactly where it had always belonged. No one asked me to take it off again.